In April 1967, a social studies teacher named Ron Jones stood before his sophomore history class at Cubberley High School in Palo Alto, California. They were studying World War II, and the class had just watched a film about the Holocaust. The images of the concentration camps and the sheer scale of the genocide left the room in a heavy silence. Then, a student named Brad raised his hand. He asked a question that has haunted historians for decades. How could the German people claim they knew nothing about the slaughter of their neighbors? How could ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, and teachers just go along with it? Jones found himself unable to provide a satisfying answer. He realized that explaining the mechanics of fascism through a textbook wasn't enough. To truly understand how people lose their individuality to a movement, he decided he would have to show them. He didn't know then that he was about to start an experiment that would spiral out of control in less than a week. He called it the third wave. On Monday, the first day of the experiment, Jones decided to focus on discipline. He began the class by lecturing on the beauty of a disciplined life. He talked about how an athlete trains or how a musician practices until their movements are perfect. Then he started with the physical environment. He told the students to sit in a specific way, feet flat on the floor, back straight, hands crossed behind the small of the back. He timed them to see how fast they could get into this position from standing in the hall. Over and over, they practiced. Within minutes, the atmosphere in the room changed. The usual teenage slumped shoulders were gone. The room was silent. Jones then introduced new rules for communication. If a student wanted to ask or answer a question, they had to stand beside their desk. They had to start every statement with the words, "Mr. Jones." They were told to be crisp and brief. To his surprise, the students didn't rebel. They seemed to enjoy it. Even the students who usually struggled to pay attention were suddenly sharp and engaged. The power of the group was starting to take hold. Tuesday was about community. When the students arrived, Jones was pleased to see they were already sitting at attention without being told. He wrote a slogan on the chalkboard in large letters: "Strength through discipline, strength through community." He told the students that being part of something larger than themselves was the highest goal. To cement this bond, he created a salute. He told them to raise their right hand toward the right shoulder, with the fingers curved in a wave-like shape. He called it the third wave salute. He told them it was a symbol of their movement. He instructed them to salute each other whenever they met, even outside of the classroom. Throughout the day, in the hallways and the cafeteria, students began saluting one another. It was a secret language. It felt like they were part of an elite club that nobody else understood. The sense of belonging was becoming addictive. By Wednesday, the experiment began to grow beyond the classroom walls. Jones issued membership cards to every student. He wanted to see how far the idea of belonging would go. Most of the cards were standard, but 3 of them were marked with a red X. Jones pulled those 3 students aside and told them they were the secret police. Their job was to report any member who didn't follow the rules or who spoke out against the third wave. He didn't expect much to happen, but within hours, students were coming to him to report their friends. They weren't doing it because they were scared of punishment. They were doing it because they felt a duty to the movement. The experiment was no longer a simulation of history. It was becoming the reality of the school. Students from other classes started asking if they could join. By the end of the day, the original class of 30 had swollen to over 200 members. Jones noticed that the high achievers in the class were becoming uneasy, while the students who usually felt like outsiders were suddenly the most vocal and loyal leaders. The social hierarchy of the school was being dismantled and replaced by a rigid authoritarian structure. Thursday was when the tension reached a breaking point. Jones was starting to lose control of the situation. He was no longer just a teacher. He was acting like a commander, and he found himself enjoying the power more than he wanted to admit. He realized he had to find a way to end it before someone got hurt, or the school administration intervened. He walked into the classroom and made a dramatic announcement. He told the students that the third wave wasn't just a school project. He claimed it was a national movement aimed at changing the country. He told them there were hundreds of other groups just like theirs across America. He announced that the following day, at noon, a national leader would appear on television to announce the formation of a third-wave youth program. He told them they were the chosen ones who would lead this new era. The students were ecstatic. They truly believed they were at the center of a historical revolution. Some students began to distance themselves from their non-member friends. The school library became a place where members sat together in silence, enforcing the rules they had created. On Friday morning, the final day, the school was buzzing. Over 200 students packed into the auditorium. They were dressed in white shirts. They sat in perfect rows, backs straight, waiting for their leader to speak. Jones had set up a television set on the stage. He asked the students to demonstrate their loyalty one last time. On his command, 200 arms rose in the third wave salute. They chanted their slogans. Strength through discipline. Strength through community. Jones then walked over to the television and turned it on. The screen was nothing but static. The students sat in total silence, watching the gray snow on the screen. They waited for 1 minute, then 2. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. Finally, someone asked where the leader was. Jones walked to the front of the stage. He told them there was no leader. There was no national movement. He told them they had been used. He then projected a film on the screen behind him. It wasn't a political speech. It was footage of the Nuremberg rallies in Nazi Germany. As the images of marching soldiers and cheering crowds filled the screen, the room went cold. Jones told the students to look at the screen and see their own faces. He told them they had become exactly what they thought they could never be. He explained that they had traded their individual freedom for the comfort of discipline and the feeling of being superior to others. He told them that they had proven how easy it is for people to follow a leader blindly if they are given a sense of purpose and a group to belong to. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. When the film ended and the lights came up, the energy of the movement had vanished. Some students were in shock. Others were crying. They walked out of the room quietly, leaving their membership cards on the floor. The experiment was over, but the weight of what they had learned stayed with them. In the years after the experiment, Ron Jones struggled with what he had done. He was eventually asked to leave his teaching position at Cubberley, though the reasons were complex and went beyond just the experiment. He spent a long time reflecting on how quickly the students, and he himself, had succumbed to the lure of authority. He noted that even he, the teacher, had been seduced by the feeling of being a leader. He had started the week wanting to teach a lesson, but by Wednesday he was enjoying the way the students obeyed him. He realized that the potential for fascism isn't something that only exists in other people or other countries. It's a part of human nature that can be triggered by the right conditions. He later wrote that the experiment showed how people are willing to give up their common sense and their morality just to feel like they belong to something bigger. The third wave became a cultural touchstone. In 1981, it was adapted into a television movie called The Wave, which was shown in schools across the world. In Germany, where the history of the Nazis is a mandatory part of the curriculum, the story had a massive impact. It was later turned into a German feature film titled Die Well, which updated the setting to a modern school to show that the same psychological triggers still exist today. The story remains relevant because it taps into a fundamental truth about human psychology. We like to believe we are independent thinkers who would stand up against injustice, but history and social psychology suggest otherwise. The experiment proved that in just 5 days, a group of typical American teenagers could be convinced to police their friends and follow a nameless leader. The students of Cubberley High School went on with their lives, but many of them never forgot that week in April. Some of them stayed in touch with Jones, grappling with the memory of how easily they had been manipulated. They learned that the most dangerous lie we tell ourselves is that it could never happen here, or that we would be the ones to say no. Jones didn't just teach them about history, he made them live it. He showed them that the line between a normal classroom and a controlled mob is much thinner than anyone wants to admit. When the experiment ended, the students didn't just walk away with a better grade in history. They walked away with the uncomfortable knowledge of what they were capable of when they stopped thinking for themselves. Jones later remarked that the greatest lesson was that we are all responsible for our own actions, even when the crowd is shouting the loudest. You think you would have been the one to stay seated, but the reality is, you probably would have been saluting with the rest of them. Thanks for watching this video. What do you think was the most shocking thing in this video?